They poured petrol on his chest, tied a tire around his neck and shouted, "Bring the matches!" David didn't scream, he didn't beg. He just whispered, "God, please, save me. I don't want to die like this." But this didn't start in a gutter with firewood and fuel. It started in a quiet home, with too much love and too little correction. The Edwards family lived in Enugu. They weren't rich, but they had enough. A 3-bedroom flat, 1 family car, and 2 generators that always found a way to spoil during the heat wave. Mr. Edwards was a senior admin officer in the Ministry of Education. Stern man, believed in the old school way of raising kids. Mrs. Edwards was the opposite, soft-spoken, ran a small but thriving fabric shop in Ogbete Main Market. She was every customer's mama. Their 2 daughters, Sarah and Faith, were obedient girls, young, beautiful teenagers. They were already in secondary school by the time Mrs. Edwards got pregnant again. This time it was a boy, and just like that, peace left the house. David was born big, heavy, loud. The day he arrived, Mr. Edwards slaughtered a big fat cow and called all his kinsmen. "My name Don Complete Oh," he shouted, hugging bottles of small stout. Mrs. Edwards smiled so much her cheeks ached. "Finally, God has answered me," she said, grinning with her Gap dentition that looks like an expressway to Lagos State. From that day, David was not just the baby of the house. He was the king. No one was allowed to scold him, not even Sarah or Faith. The first time Sarah said, "David, stop pouring milk on the floor," her mother hissed, "Come on, he's just a baby. Must you shout?" When he turned 3, David already knew how to fake cry and get whatever he wanted. If you didn't give him biscuit, he'd scream until Mrs. Edwards rushed in like it was an emergency. At 4, he took 200 naira from his father's wallet. "David, did you take this money?" He blinked and said, "No." Sarah took it. Sarah was grounded. David got a sweet. Faith once complained to her mom, "Mommy, this boy is learning how to lie. We should talk to him." "So you people have started ganging up against him. He's your brother, oh. You people should be calming down." The signs were everywhere, but love blinded them. He broke 2 phones, stole pencils, pushed a classmate into a gutter. Still, Mr. and Mrs. Edwards defended him. "He's just stubborn like me," Mr. Edwards would laugh. "He'll outgrow it. Boys are like that." By the time David turned 10, he was feared. Not loved, not respected, feared. He was the kind of boy teachers called trouble walking on 2 legs. He once locked a classmate inside the toilet for 2 hours. He forged his test scores. He stole his aunt's gold earring and said the house girl took it. Mrs. Edwards beat the girl and sent her back to the village. David watched from the kitchen, eating ice cream. At 12, David started hanging with street boys. He wore earrings. He cursed at his sisters. He would walk out of the house and return at midnight like nothing happened. The neighbors began to complain. "Madam, this your son dey disturb my children, oh, he dey teach them bad thing. Your David poured sand inside my daughter's beans." One day, a teacher from his school came to the house. "Ma, David has been caught stealing a phone from the staff room." That was the day Mr. Edwards snapped. He removed his belt and beat David until his arms hurt. David didn't cry. He just stared at his father with this empty look. That night, Mr. Edwards told his wife, "This boy go kill person one day. If him no change, I wash my hands oh." Mrs. Edwards sobbed and anointed David's pillow with olive oil every night while he slept. One morning, Mrs. Edwards didn't get up as usual. No kitchen noise, no calling David's name for the 5th time, just silence. She felt drained, like her energy had packed its bags and left overnight. Her head was heavy, her body weak, and the heat radiating off her skin could boil yam. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe it was just stress, the kind that comes free with David's daily drama, but Mr. Edwards wasn't having it. The moment he saw her lying there like a retired soldier, he said, "Nope, hospital, now." After a round of tests and some long, awkward silence in the doctor's office, the doctor walked in, cleared his throat, and dropped a bomb that shook the room. "Congratulations, Mrs. Edwards is 6 weeks pregnant." Silence. Then both of them, at the exact same time, screamed, "How?" Not that they didn't know how, but how now, with all they were going through, another child, now? They weren't ready, not emotionally, not financially, not even mentally. David alone was already a full-time reality show. But then, after the panic settled, they looked at each other. Maybe, just maybe, this was God's way of saying, "I see your tears, here's hope." And so they embraced the news. 9 months later, Mrs. Edwards gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Daniel, because truly, only God could understand what this family had been through. A couple of years later, Sarah left for university. Faith avoided David. Daniel, the youngest child, was now old enough to be afraid of his elder brother. David walked through the house like a ghost. If you talked to him, he snapped. If you ignored him, he grew worse. He was always at betting shops, always fighting, always angry. But the scariest part? He didn't care what anybody thought. Then something happened that nobody expected. One Sunday, Pastor John, the youth pastor at their church, stopped David outside. "You know, this anger is not who you are," the man said, calm but firm. David rolled his eyes. "You think you know me? Pastor, I beg, leave me alone." "No, I don't know you, but God does, and He never writes people off the way humans do." David didn't reply, but that night he didn't sleep well. A part of him really wants to change, but how would he start? He tried. Briefly, he helped an old woman carry her load. He returned change at the chemist without pocketing some. He even prayed once, just once. But when Mama Peace told someone she saw him collect money from one woman, the whole street buzzed. David done thief again. That boy in a cursed pickin'. His mother didn't ask, she just hissed and said, "God, why me?" David stopped trying. He told himself, "Since them done already mark me bad, make I give them bad well." He stopped coming home early. He started rolling with Fred and 2 other boys who had dropped out of school. They called themselves street lords. Then one day, something happened, something that would change everything. A phone went missing, a shout rang out, and all fingers pointed at David. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, hot sun, heavy air, and the sound of screaming. "Nah, him! I see Am with the phone." Before David could even turn around, 2 boys had grabbed him by the back of his shirt. They dragged him like a goat across the dusty street. People rushed out of their houses. Shopkeepers left their stalls. Okada men parked mid-ride. David was confused. "Wait, I didn't carry anything. Which phone? Who talk say na me?" Nobody listened. The noise had grown. "He done thief again. Don't let him run oh. Call vigilante." Mama Peace heard it from her compound. So did Mr. and Mrs. Edwards. Before long, David's own mother was pushing through the crowd, wrapper half-tied, eyes wide. She saw her son being kicked on the floor, but instead of running to defend him, she screamed, "So you have finally brought shame to us. Ah, David, you want to finish me?" David turned his head slowly and looked at her. He was already bleeding from the nose, lips swollen, shirt torn, and yet the pain in his eyes wasn't from the beating, it was from the betrayal. "Mummy, I swear, I no do am..." He said it quietly as two boys pressed their knees into his back. But nobody answered. Mr. Edwards arrived and stood in silence, his face hard, expression blank. The tire came from nowhere. Someone tossed it from the other side of the street. Petrol followed. Fred was in the crowd, watching silent. "We done tire for this boy matter. Make we teach him lesson once and for all." David struggled, but his hands were tied behind him now. The rubber tire was heavy and hot under the sun. Someone poured petrol over his chest. The smell stung his nose, his lungs. And still, nobody came forward. Sarah and Faith weren't there. Daniel was hiding behind the fence. His mother had collapsed in shock. Only Pastor John had not yet arrived. David closed his eyes. The crowd was chanting. The boy with the match was trembling, but excited. And David whispered, for the first time with his whole heart, "God, please, save me. I don't want to die like this." The match lit. The flame danced, yellow and cruel. The boy holding it raised his hand. The crowd screamed louder, "Burn him! Burn him!" And just as he was about to lower the match, "Stop!" A voice, loud, sharp, shaking. Everyone turned. It was Fred. Yes, Fred, the same boy who had been silent, who had watched everything like it was a show. Now his hands were raised, his face pale, his body trembling. "It's me," he shouted. "I took the phone, not David." Silence, dead silence. Someone in the crowd dropped a stick. Another person gasped. Mr. Edwards took a step back. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "What did you just say?" the man barked, eyes fixed on Fred. Fred swallowed hard, his voice shaking. "I said, I'm the one who took the phone," gasps. "Where is it?" Fred hesitated, then pointed weakly. "I hid it in the bush, behind Mama Uche's shop." Another pause. You could hear a mosquito land. Fred added quickly, "I wanted to sell it, but I swear I haven't touched it since. The phone is still where I hid it." The weight of his confession dropped like a stone. The crowd went silent. That kind of silence where everyone's just staring, waiting, judging. Fred looked like he wanted the ground to open and swallow him. The boy with the matchstick stood still. The flame had already burned out, leaving only a thin trail of smoke curling from the blackened tip. His hand was still frozen mid-air, like he hadn't realized the fire was gone. Then, with a shaky breath, he let it fall. The stick hit the ground with a soft tick, but the sound felt louder than thunder. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Then the murmurs started, low, confused, horrified. "So, David didn't steal the phone? Jesus Christ, we almost burned innocent boy. This life fear people." Voices broke, eyes darted away in shame. Some stared at David, not with anger anymore, but with a guilt so heavy it pressed their heads down. A woman covered her mouth. A man dropped the stick he was holding like it burned him. Another walked away, shaking his head in disbelief. And one by one, just like that, they began to leave. No apologies, no words, just the echo of their footsteps and the shame they couldn't scrub off. David stood there, still tied, still bruised, but now seen and broken in a different way. Pastor John arrived then. He rushed forward, breathing heavily, just in time to see the crowd part. David was still on his knees, still tied, still drenched in petrol. Tears ran down his face. He didn't even react. He just sat there, staring into space. Pastor John knelt beside him and untied the ropes. "It's over, my son. You're safe. You hear me. You're safe now." But David didn't answer. Mrs. Edwards stood at the edge of the crowd. She couldn't move. Her legs were shaking, her lips trembling, and the words rang in her head again. "God, please, save me. I don't want to die like this." She had heard it. Her own son had said it, begged, pleaded, and she had cursed him instead. Mr. Edwards walked away. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't wait to hear more. The crowd slowly began to disperse, ashamed, silent, but David remained on the ground. David didn't come home that night. He didn't come home the next day either. Nobody knew where he went, not even Pastor John. He had simply vanished. Mrs. Edwards couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Her eyes were swollen. Mr. Edwards refused to talk about it. He just stayed in his room, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, making that clicking sound it always made when power was from the small generator. Sarah returned from school. Faith wept every time someone said David's name. Daniel started having nightmares. 3 days passed. Then one evening, just as the sun was bleeding orange into the sky, a knock came at the gate. Pastor John opened it. David stood there, quiet, taller somehow, his face calm but unreadable. "Can I come in?" he asked. Pastor John stepped aside. They sat in the living room. Pastor John offered food. David shook his head. "I hate them, and I know they hate me too," David finally said, voice trembling like a boy who'd held in tears for far too long. "And I don't know how to live with them again." The pastor didn't rush him. He just nodded slowly. "You don't have to decide now. Healing takes time, but you must let your heart stay open. Not just to them, but to God." David looked away, blinking hard. His throat tightened. "I can't open up to them," he whispered. "I don't know how to. They already see me as a mistake, a problem they're tired of solving." He wiped his eyes quickly, but the tears kept coming. "I wanted to change. God knows I tried, but I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know where to go. And the more I messed up, the more they pushed me away. I mean, I get it. I caused them pain. I embarrassed them, but they gave up on me too soon." His voice cracked. "I still needed them." He buried his face in his hands and let it out. Not just the tears, but the years of silence, of feeling like a burden in his own home. The pastor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. David raised his head slowly. "I prayed that day, you know. Not because I believed, but because I was scared. Scared of dying. Scared no one would even care if I did." The pastor looked him in the eye and said softly, "And he answered right. That's all that matters." And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, David didn't feel hated. He felt heard. The next day, word spread fast. David had returned. Some neighbors came by to say sorry. Some couldn't even look him in the eye. Fred was nowhere to be found. He had run away from the street. That night, there was a soft knock on David's door, then another. "David?" It was his father's voice, but softer, careful, almost afraid. Behind it, his mother's voice followed. "Please, can we come in?" David didn't say anything for a long while. Then came his quiet reply. "Door no day lock." They stepped in, slowly, like people entering a sacred place. David sat on the edge of his mattress, his back to the door, shoulders hunched in the dim light. They stood there for a moment. Then Mr. Edwards dropped to his knees. His wife followed, no hesitation. Two proud adults, now brought low by love and regret. Mr. Edwards' voice cracked as he spoke. "David, I failed you. I should have raised you, not just shouted, not just flogged. I should have seen your pain instead of only your mistakes. I should have given you the opportunity to speak up. I'm deeply sorry." Mrs. Edwards wiped her eyes. "We're sorry, my son. Truly sorry for not believing you." Her voice couldn't carry the weight of the pain as she remembers that very incident. She cried bitterly. David didn't move. He just stared at the wall for a long moment. Then slowly he turned to face them. His eyes, bloodshot, tired, but burning with the weight of everything unsaid. Then came the questions. "If I had died that day, would you have cried because you lost me? or because you would feel guilty? Why did it take a tire around my neck for you to see me? When I was failing, when I was angry, when I was screaming without words, did you ever stop to ask what was wrong? Or did you just say, "This boy is possessed"? They said nothing, because what could they say? He continued. Why did home feel like punishment? Why did love feel like a reward I had to earn? Why did I always have to be better, to be treated like your son? The room was still, except for the sound of sobbing, first from Mrs. Edwards, then from Mr. Edwards, loud, guttural cries from a man who had run out of ways to hide his shame. David's voice dropped barely above a whisper. If it was me kneeling before you, broken, begging, would you have reached out, or would you have walked away again? I know I messed up big time, but you didn't give me an opportunity to change. You gave up on me too soon. I've forgotten what it means to have a loving parents, David said, crying uncontrollably like a baby. They both reached for him then, desperate, broken, unprepared for how deeply they had hurt their own son. And for the first time in years, David stood up. He didn't speak. He just fell into their arms. Not because everything was okay, but because healing had finally begun. The sun rose slowly the next morning, casting soft light on a home that hadn't known peace in years. David was awake before everyone else. He sat in the backyard barefoot, sipping from a cup of lukewarm tea Pastor John had brought over. His eyes weren't as hard as they used to be, but they weren't soft either. He was different now, but not yet healed. The neighborhood hadn't moved on. Some people crossed the road when they saw him. Some whispered. Some tried to smile like nothing ever happened. "Good morning, David." He nodded back politely, but inside a part of him always paused, waiting to hear the word again. Thief. In church that Sunday, Pastor John called him out. This young man was almost killed for something he didn't do, but even before that day, the world had already written him off. Yet God didn't. David stood there, hands in his pockets. He didn't cry, but everyone who looked into his eyes saw a truth that pierced through them. They had almost burned an innocent boy alive. After the service, Mr. and Mrs. Edwards walked up to the pulpit. Mr. Edwards cleared his throat. We were wrong. As parents, as neighbors, as people, we failed him. We judged too early, loved too little. Mrs. Edwards clutched a handkerchief, barely able to speak. She just turned to David and said, "Forgive me, even if it takes a lifetime." David looked at them. The crowd watched, breathless. Then David said, "I don't know if I've healed, but I know I'm willing to try." He didn't smile, but he stepped forward and hugged his mother and father warmly. Weeks passed. David didn't go back to his old friends. Fred never returned. The street seemed quieter without him. David started spending more time with Pastor John. He helped paint the church walls, joined the media team, went for evangelism once. Some called it eye service, others said it was fake. But David wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just wanted to live with peace. One day, Daniel, his little brother, walked into his room holding a toy car with a broken wheel. "Can you help me fix it?" he asked. David blinked. Something about that question unlocked a door he thought was shut forever. He smiled, a real one this time. "Bring screwdriver, let's do it together." That feeling to him was like broken pieces coming together. That night, Mr. Edwards called David to sit with him on the balcony. "You remind me of my father," he said slowly, hard-headed, proud, but full of fire. "I didn't understand you, and that ignorance almost cost me my son." David didn't speak, he just listened, and sometimes that was enough. Months later, a journalist came to the street. She was working on a documentary about jungle justice and wrongful accusations. David declined an interview, but as she packed up her things, he followed her and said, "If you write about me, write the truth. I wasn't a good person, but they made sure I never had a reason to be better. Until one day, God gave me a reason through fire." The documentary went viral. The story of the boy they almost burned trended on social media. People sent messages, strangers reached out, offers came in to support his education. And David? He finally returned to school, not to prove anything, not to shame anyone, but because he now believed something he never did before. Even burnt bridges can be rebuilt. Now tell me, which part of David's story hit you the hardest? Was it the tire, the whisper to God, or the question he asked his parents? If you were David, could you forgive them? Would you ever trust your parents again? And if you could sit down with Mr. and Mrs. Edwards, what advice would you give them about parenting, love, and discipline? Let's talk in the comments. Drop your thoughts below, because someone out there needs to hear your truth. Your voice could help change another parent's story. And if this story touched your heart, share it with a friend. Let's end jungle justice together. Subscribe for more real-life stories that expose, heal, and inspire. Thanks for watching and seeing you in our next video.